I'm almost glad we're talking about Kinnikuman and not like Hunter or something, because that means the discussion's only been like an hour or two during this heat wave where we can't have air conditioning or doors open or you know what I'm feeling, how I feel, right, Mathwiz?
Oh yeah, no, I getcha.
All right, hello and welcome to the Nen Show Podcast. This is your host Craftsdwarf here with my co-host Mathwiz. Say hello, Mathwiz.
One of the comments said something like, "If you're not into it by this reading, that probably won't change." And
oh no,
that's not good. I don't want to hear that.
Oh no, I enjoyed myself personally. But anyway,
I will say that this reading was better.
Mm-hmm.
Define the definition of good. Can definitely. I don't know where I was going with that.
I mean, what I'll say is, like, I was literally, like, maybe a volume into the 7 Akuma Choujin arc, and I was like, well, this is already my favorite arc in this series, so, like, I didn't even finish it before I decided I liked it better than the previous ones. But,
I see. Well, maybe you'll convince me that it was better than I thought it was.
Maybe. I mean, I enjoyed myself. Anyway, so before we get into comments, a couple days ago, as of this recording, about a week ago, relative to when you will be listening to this, assuming you're listening when this episode came out, we started the Patreon poll for the next Nen Show series after Kinnikuman. The Patreon is actually linked in the description of the YouTube video now, which it wasn't before. Which was thankfully pointed out by someone in the comments, and I was like, wait, how is that? What the? I don't know why I haven't had that linked since we started it. I guess it's just like, because I would usually like, copy paste like a lot of the description and then like make slight changes like, oh, this is what we're reading. And I guess I just never added the Patreon when I really should have. So if that was preventing you from, patroning and voting, there you go. Or if patroning suggesting some things, and it's already in stiff competition, so go ahead and maybe make a tiebreaker, because the top two right now are pretty close, and then it's only like, I think the most has like 6 votes at the time of this recording. So yeah. So are you ready for comments? I guess I'll start, because this one was not just, Mr. Grem sort of or something, he mentioned Ramen Man killing Brocken Man in the anime.
Yeah, and I saw that clip linked on Twitter, and where he like literally turns him into like ramen and eats him.
Yes. Fodman replied to my tweet about the episode with a clip on Twitter, and I watched it, and that was possibly even more horrifying.
Yeah.
Like, it is, and there was even something else that happened this reading, because it's kind of funny where it's like, yeah, the hyper-violence can be really shocking, but sometimes things that are more abstract and can be even worse. And in that case, like, yeah, being turned into ramen and eaten like, freshly after death is yeah, I guess that's a bit more horrifying than being snapped in half. And in this reading, you had, a Cube Man who was, like, exploded, and he's, like, in one of the fights, so... Jesus Christ. You go ahead with a comment, because I do have a bunch more, but I was curious as to what you thought was interesting to respond to.
Well, I know that like there were some comments talking about Kinnikuman's influence on certain stuff, like Togashi and Oda and stuff, but it was just like, I don't know, things I had heard before, but it's, I don't know, I guess it's good to like have that reiterated.
Mm-hmm.
Like the whole, it starts as a comedy and then becomes like a fighting action manga thing. That's what Togashi did with Yu Yu Hakusho. Yeah.
Right. He specifically cited Kinnikuman as like the reference for that. Though someone else, did I write it down? No, I didn't write it down. Sorry, but someone mentioned that specifically why Kinnikuman kind of shifted to action was the result of Ring ni Kakuro, which was done by the Kuramada, the author of Saint Seiya. It was a boxing manga, and it was super important to just shonen stuff in general. I think Toriyama also had wrote a letter to Kuramada at the time, like saying that he couldn't draw something like that. Though I think that was at the time he was publishing Dragon Ball, so which eventually shifted to the more ZE action oriented stuff. So yeah, but it was interesting to think about. So TWIL or Twill, I don't know how to pronounce it, mentioned MUSCLE, which was I just thought it was weird, because it's like, oh yeah, Kinnikuman, but it's like apparently they distributed like little toys of Kinnikuman under a different name, And like they explained like, oh, this is why it's called Ultimate Muscle, and apparently some of the games were under the same branding. And it just I googled and looked it up, and it was just weird to see, like, because I remember seeing this as a kid. Maybe it just didn't leave an impression on me. For some reason, the little figures, like that idea of them, like, or maybe I'm thinking of the erasers, the character erasers, where, you know, you have this really shitty eraser that looks like a character and it doesn't erase anything for shit, that kind of thing. So that I would recommend, and that's what this reminded me of. Just that weird, like, the 80s and 90s just had a lot of merchandise and toys, and they just threw a lot of shit out there trying to get people to buy it. So it was weird to see, like, wait, that's Robin Mask, that's Kinnikuman, and just like in these little toys that, you know, maybe I saw at one point as a kid, but don't remember really. It was just like, the localization is weird. Box Story, he's also Pablo on my server, he had a long comment chain with a bunch of like clarifications and some of his own thoughts. Though one thing he clarified was page counts. Like we were I was talking about like the gag, you know, these are like gag manga length, like 15 pages, or were all Jump series like that? And apparently no. It was like gag series are shorter, and, you know, everything else is a little longer, the more usual like 19-20 pages. So also apparently fucking Ultimate Muscle Kinnikuman Nidai volumes are like fucking, some of them, because it's super out of print, so some of them can go for like hundreds of dollars. Because I was wondering, why hasn't someone just bought them and scanned them? Oh, that's why. Which is also funny because Mr. Magnimos mentioned, he's talked about a couple things, but one thing he mentioned that he had all of those volumes, and I'm like, holy shit, dude, you're a millionaire. He's got all the Ultimate Muscle volumes.
Honestly, yeah.
But no, he was also mentioning, like, yeah, you can just read the later Kinnikuman stuff, the 2011 onward stuff, but I personally won't, because, like, you know, I want to see, you know, the evolution of writing and art that would continue through, you know, Ultimate Muscle after Kinnikuman, and then, you know, so, you know, and I just like to have, you know, that kind of context when I go through things usually, but it's good to know. It is still helpful. I think I had one or two more to respond to, if you had any more.
Well, I did also think it was funny that there were, like, a couple of people, like, the fact that this was the episode where, like, a couple of people came over from, like, my wrestling channel, and they're like, hey, what's going on? When are you putting out another video? It's like, did they know that Kinnikuman was like, a wrestling manga? Like, what are the odds?
I saw that, and I was wondering what you thought about that, because that's exactly what I thought, is like, are they here because wrestling, and because you're here? Well, you were talking about wrestling too, you know, so it's like maybe they were always listening, but it's like, you know, now that you're specifically bringing it up, they're like, well, you know, what if Matt? You know, well, no, you brought it up on Joe too, so maybe not. I don't know. That is, it's just, yeah, it is funny. That special guy mentioned the Anime Hero, who's a channel who talks about they've talked about Kinnikuman stuff. I don't know when or if I'll watch them, but it seems it doesn't seem like a very talked about show or manga, so it's nice to see that someone's, you know, done something about it. Because yeah, like some of the commenters are like seem to be like really big fans of the manga, which, you know, and it's like I've never really talked to anyone, like, you know, like, yeah, there were some people on my server who read through it, but, you know, I hadn't before really seen people who are like, oh yeah, Kinnikuman, it's just really great, you know, and I was like, huh, you know, like, and especially even after like these readings I get, where I'm starting to get more into it, but I don't know, I'm excited to see where it goes, even if it'll take us a while to read because of the lack of translation. But the fact it is getting translated, like, if it wasn't, then maybe I'd read. I don't know if I probably wouldn't, because I also haven't read Baki the Grappler, where the first series is not fully translated, and everyone says, oh, it doesn't matter, like the stuff that it wasn't translated, you know, it hasn't been referred back to, there wasn't a lot of character growth or anything. But I'm like, but I want to decide that for myself, and that's kind of why I want to go through everything, because, you know, I tend to disagree with the community sometimes, so it's like I just want to be able to read it and decide for myself, you know, so you know, that's another reason. And this one was yikes. Drema had mentioned apparently there's a band that modeled themselves after Kinnikuman's blackface character, and they go around singing. What was the music? Yeah, they perform in actual blackface, and it's like, no, yeah,
no,
yeah. Kinnikuman is problematic, actually. A dissertation, I don't know, like, just a lot, like, oh man, that's a little yikes. But anyway, that was it for comments, at least for me, so. But anyway, on to the reading. So it kind of goes right back into the kaiju stuff. like they make jokes about, oh, Kinnikuman's out of shape. And I don't know, I like the first chapter, he, like kind of brings up a recurring thing, because like I guess the series has had like it's kaiju stuff and the wrestling stuff. In this chapter, like he loses his title and his belt because of like he was defending people and saving people, like that kind of came first. And that also comes up in the 7 Akuma Choujin arc, where like lives are more important than this sport and competition that they do. So I didn't think about that until skimming through this now. But there's that idea being introduced, kind of.
Yeah, because I had always thought it was weird that like they had these competitions, and but like the whole premise behind like the Choujin Olympics and whatever is that like Choujin are like heroes, like they're supposed to be. I guess it was already kind of explored that there was potentially some like corruption there, because there were some evil heroes or people like Ramen Man who were violent heroes.
Anti-heroes is maybe because that's I don't remember if I mentioned this before, but like because I think the anti-hero kind of Western comic book movement really started in it would have been the 80s and the 90s, like Punisher, dark, all these dark edgy stories. But I don't know, maybe Punisher's a little older, I don't know, but I guess Ramen Man would have been closer to that, where like Kinnikuman and Terryman would have been closer to like your Batman and Superman, your normal superheroes.
But yeah, like even in the second Choujin Olympics, like Terry stops his train or whatever to save a dog. And everyone's because like that's why when he gets knocked out of the Olympics. But it's like, wait, but if this is supposed to be like a showcase of the heroes and like their strength or whatever, then it seems weird that doing something heroic to like giving up the competition for the sake of doing something heroic, for the sake of doing something good, that like isn't rewarded, because like it's a competition of heroes, but if they do something heroic, they're not actually like rewarded for it. Like in Terry's case, he gets eliminated because he didn't follow the rules, and it's I don't know. I'm not necessarily saying it's a bad thing. It's just like interesting that's something.
And then I guess also probably the most important thing that happens in the this arc is Bibinba, or the lady who falls for Kinnikuman. Like I didn't think so. Yeah.
Yeah, especially like the early, like it's like a comedy gag character initially. So the whole part of her like fall. Of course it's stupid, but like I don't know. It's just like okay, I did, like he did the thing, and she like falls for him because he did this like he basically like they were gonna fight, and she. He like cuts her dress in half or whatever, and then he hands her a towel or something, and she's like, "Oh,
Meat's cape and gives it to her."
Yeah, that's the cape. That's right. And she's like, I love him now, and it's like okay, it's like the most. I can't think of the word I'm looking for, but it's just bizarre.
Yeah, she is just kind of like this. She is a little shallow. In that, there's the other guy, who's just really ugly, he's or what was it? Shishikawa Boo from the Barbak clan is what I'm able to say, because I'm on that page right now, and I would never have remembered this otherwise. And she's just like, ew, he's ugly. I don't want to be, and then because I don't know, I think I heard someone on my servers, or I think it was Pablo, saying how something about her shallowness is kind of interesting. Well, because Subaru Subaru? No, Suguru. ReZero. What? Suguru is like, he doesn't have a lot of self-confidence, and we see issues of that, like, because I kind of talked about how he's like, before even, being this, shit, what was the term? You made a video about it.
Wait, what was it again?
Like Naruto and Deku and the self, what was it? I can't remember.
The insecure shonen protagonist?
I couldn't remember that word for some reason. Yeah, and so Kinnikuman, he is kind of like, he before even getting to that, he was just incompetent, and now like that he's had these successes, there's a level of insecurity there. Like after he beat Warsman, I think he was like, wow, you're such a great warrior, and like you were the better fighter than me. Like even though he won, he's still recognizing Warsman, on some level. And I guess it is kind of interesting that Binma is kind of like, she is shallow, so like she also had a thing with Warsman going on, So I don't know, I haven't seen anything like major there, but it was just an idea that I was turned on to, or that I heard that I had in mind. But also, I guess the arc is pretty interesting because it kind of returns to the normal comedy stuff, but then it does go back to the wrestling action stuff. So I do wonder if maybe it was like an experiment to see like what they could still do after kind of changing the series a bit with the American Tour and the Choujin Olympics. Because like the defense force that they introduce is basically like how an Ultraman series is usually structured is there's the human who can turn into an Ultra who works with a self-defense force who are like government soldiers who deal with like aliens and weird things. And so like that's what those three were a parody of it. But so they like introduces these characters and then they're just gone after a few chapters, because it goes back into the wrestling stuff. And I don't imagine it comes back to the more Toku inspired stuff for very long if it does. So like I think I forgot to mention it last time, but I was a little like when Kinnikuman was fighting Robin Mask and it's like Kinnikuman can fly. Like and they're fighting on this big pillar and this ring that might fall, and it's like, oh no, the ring might fall, and it's like, but can't you both fly? Like just a little clash between the two that I thought was weird at the time. Not a big deal, but I just was like, oh yeah. And then there was the Beansman arc where he wanted to save his planet, so he came to get a bunch of Choujin, and he brought the Choujin to his planet and he saved the planet. Yeah, that's it. And it's like, it was like 7 chapters, and it just felt really like anticlimactic because like they work together and they win, and then they go home, and that's it. And I'm like, okay, that was weird.
And it's also like, I don't know. It's another thing where like anticlimactic, but also the way that I guess it makes it seem anticlimactic in a way that's like a mix of the arc isn't grandiose enough, but also it's like long enough that it's not just a little 3-chapter thing or like a little one-off.
Yeah, it was more like 4 or 5, like 7 was out.
Because with the chapters being as short as they are, and things kind of being weirdly structured to, well, maybe not weirdly structured, but we have to have something happen in this little 12-page chapter or whatever. And I don't know. Yeah, it seems like, I don't know. Like there's a degree to which the earlier chapters were one-offs, and so even if there wasn't much time to really flesh anything out for 12 pages of a conflict, I don't know, the way that translates into this little 7-chapter, this mini arc, it's also kind of weird in its own way.
Yeah, it's like it's trying to do like a longer arc, but in the more Toku. I wonder if actually maybe again, like I don't know how reactive they were to like the results, because one thing mentioned in the comments was apparently Yudetamago, the duo, like they started Kinnikuman like right out of high school, to the point where their parents were like, oh, we want them to go to college, and Shonen Jump was like, well, if Kinnikuman isn't successful, we'll pay for them to go to college, which apparently they could not do at the time, but it paid off, and Kinnikuman's like super famous now. So, yeah. So thinking about the series again, where it's like it's more in the vein of like Rave, where it's like they're literal children, like who just out of high school, like making early 20s at oldest, making these manga, and it's like I can barely do better now, 10 years later, personally speaking. So. And let alone with these deadlines and stuff. So so I do wonder how like I said, reactive they are to the popular polls and stuff. Because maybe this arc wasn't going over well, and they're just like, okay, let's just end it and do something else. Because like it's like 3 chapters of gathering the group, 1 of going to the planet, and then 1 of resolving the conflict, and it's just over. And it introduced Brocken Jr., who becomes important later. The other guys not so much, but. And I guess, you had Beansman, who was kind of shitting on Kinnikuman the whole time, and he was even, instrumental in helping beating the Space Samurai, but then he still didn't get, recognized, I guess, which, would be something that fed more into his, insecurity and such. But, other than that, it's, not a lot to take from it, and, it is kind of, weirdly structured, because it's just, because you've talked about how, a shonen story, they'll have this long build-up story, and then you'll just, resolve it in 1 chapter and get, a whole epilogue chapter or something. Yeah. And this is, okay, let's build up a story for 4 or 5 chapters, resolve it, and then, there's 1 epilogue page, So...
Yeah. Yeah, there's just not really much else for me to say about it, because I'm even having a hard time remembering the things that happened, and I only just read it a couple days ago. It hasn't been that long.
All right. Anyway, now we're getting into the first of the two arcs, which is the 21st Choujin, or 22nd? 21st Choujin Olympics. And I thought it was okay. There was two things that I thought it's like, okay, it's really weird that we just read this after Ashita Joe. One was when he was training to fight Warsman. There was literally an Ashita, like the translation that's mentioned.
The boxing gym.
Yes, the gym, and then there's also Rikishi Man, and I don't know what that means, but and obviously like there's like virtually no similarities between the characters other than that they're like, you know, both rivals and I don't know, Japanese, I guess. But I was like, oh my god, another Rikishi Man. Oh no, another Rikishi. Oh wait, shit, that might have been a spoiler for people who didn't read Joe. I might get that one out. Whoops.
How dare. Although I feel like if you're reading the Kinnikuman, well, I guess that's not necessarily true, but like if you're watching the Kinnikuman podcast, maybe you don't read Shounen, which is interesting. But yeah, like if you're familiar with Kinnikuman, surely you're familiar with Joe, I would hope.
Maybe. Well, see, it's like, not
Joe necessarily, I guess, because like there was one of the commenters had said like, oh, Kinnikuman was my first like animated property that I came across or whatever, which is interesting.
Yeah. Well, it's like Joe, I feel like you know about if you're into anime because you know about Ashina, like Tazaki, the history of the medium and manga and stuff. You know, so it's like Shonen fans are maybe less likely to read who have read or know about Joe, where Kinnikuman has like it was on 4Kids. It was on Saturday mornings in the same block that would eventually, I don't know if it ran alongside One Piece, the 4Kids of One Piece, but it was in the same like on the same channel in the same like time, you know, like so it's like there's a level at which Ultimate Muscle is and by extension Kinnikuman is like recognizable, even if like, you know, it doesn't have nearly like the staying power of thing or like, you know, not relevance, you know, it doesn't have nearly the amount of people who would recognize it compared to like Yu-Gi-Oh or Pokemon or even One Piece, but it is like, so there's definitely some crossover, especially in, you know, the Nen Show, where it's like, let's read all the shonen manga ever, and, you know, including Ashita Joe and now Kinnikuman, like literally in the same, you know, one after the other, but yeah. And apparently, at least readers of Kinnikuman at the time were expected to know about Ashita Joe on some level if he's going to be referencing it. So, but yeah, it was funny to get two Rikishis in a row. Though I have a feeling I know which one's both of our favorites. Also, I like the gag with where Kinnikuman's like yelling at Rikishi Man on TV and he like sumo slaps him through the TV, like just meta jokes like that. I don't even know if that's meta, but it's weird. I thought it was funny.
Yeah, it's definitely like I can't think of the word I'm looking for either.
It's goofy in a way that it's like I don't know. But anyway, we get the Olympics proper. You know, Kinnikuman kind of keeps like you know he's continuing his luck where he's just like he makes it through the sieve that way. And yeah, you already kind of talked about the train stuff a bit where Terry Man, he you know, he saves the puppy. So, I guess one thing I was going to mention about that is I thought it was interesting because you also see it in the Akuma Choujin, where, like, how Terry Man is... Because, you know, we know he's rivals with Kinnikuman, but he's never put into a situation that makes him look weak, I guess. Like, in this case, he gets kicked out of the Olympics, like, pretty relatively early on, so we don't see him in any of the fights. Where, like, you know, before, like, you know, in the last Choujin Olympics, he was fighting with... you know, Robin Mask, and he was injured, and there was a lot of other stuff going on there, and it, you know, same in the American tour, but it's like, yeah, he's always like, he's supposed to be Kinnikuman's rival, but he's not put below him necessarily, even though he doesn't get the same level like fights and stuff. And in the Akuma Choujin and stuff, I felt like, you know, his showing was pretty impressive, you know, so, you know, I just took a note of how like carefully Terry Man has been handled, relatively speaking, just to keep him as a rival to Kinnikuman without having him, you know, like, he fights the bad guy but then loses to which, you know, who Kinnikuman beats, you know, that kind of stuff, like every time. Okay, so I had a question, like this kind of mostly comes up for something later, but I'm just, like, there's the race part where Kinnikuman and Rikishi Man kind of work together a bit, and... So, because last time you mentioned baby faces, and I looked it up, and it's like, okay, so there's like, you know, there's faces, but then there's also baby faces who are like really good faces who don't, you know, who are they're the Superman, I guess, kind of, you know, those kind of heroes. So I was wondering, are there like heels who are like Like, there's really, bad heels who are always bad, but are there like heels that's like sometimes work with with faces sometimes or stuff like that? I know there's like heel face turns, because I was thinking about how like, yeah, in like the Choujin Olympics you have like, Ramen Man or Robin Mask would be heels, but then when you get to the Akuma Choujin arc, it's like they're good guys because, even though they're relatively bad, like, they're more anti-heroes, and like the Akuma Choujin, the Devil Choujin, they're worse. They're the so I was wondering if there was actually a term for it, or
I think I've heard like tweener used before, like if you're in between like heel and face, but I don't think it's all that common. I think there are some characters who definitely blur the line, like they'll kind of float between one or the other. But again, I don't think it's generally that common. It's normally more that people will be kind of one or the other, or they will like turn.
Gotcha.
Which I definitely did kind of start to pick up on with this stretch of chapters. Like, I was thinking about Robin Mask in particular, that he starts out as like, he's definitely like he's the good guy. He's the face in in the first Choujin Olympics. So it's like him versus Kinnikuman is kind of like a babyface versus babyface matchup, whereas then later in the American tour, he has like his heel turn, and that kind of carries through into the next Olympics.
21st. Right.
Yeah, and then he turns face again for the so like I don't know what to make of that. Like maybe there's like some sort of like wrestling narrative, kind of like, or not narrative, but using kind of like wrestling, I don't know, because like ways that wrestling tells its stories, because if you're a wrestler, you're around for so long, and it's kind of like you're in a storyline that never has like a proper conclusion. Like it's always got to be connected to another storyline until you retire or whatever. So the people always have these opportunities to kind of, maybe you're a face for a couple years and then you're a heel, and then a couple years later you're a face again, or some people do it even more frequently than that. But I don't know, like maybe there's some of that kind of woven into Kinnikuman, but I'm like, I don't know what to make of that.
Like I've never really gone through wrestling, but there are definitely moments that I think about it, and it's like, this makes it just, it gives me vibes of like, this is maybe like with in the last time I didn't think about it till later, but there's the whole like backstage stuff where Terry Man's like, I'm gonna go talk to Kinnikuman. He's like, and he hears Kinnikuman like shit talking him. He's like, I'm gonna kill Kinnikuman. Like I'm like, and sometimes in wrestling we'll see what happens backstage, and like they're still like acting, they're still in character and stuff, and it's still building into this narrative. But I was just like, like I don't know, it just reminds me of like I don't know how old some of these things, like how, when was the first time we saw the backstage in on TV in a televised wrestling thing. Like this is 80s, versus like perhaps wrestling's been older than that. So I don't know. So just stuff like that just makes me think about like, is this how it works in wrestling? And yeah, I guess there is like with Robin Mask, there's like I've heard the term like wrestling character development, where there's very clear like faces and heels, like on some, like I'm sure there's some like interesting and compelling stuff, but it's usually like you're pretty clear, even if even if a character goes back and forth, you're pretty, there's one you're supposed to root for usually, like there's only so much room for like complex characterization, I would say, but I don't know. It's interesting because I guess I'm getting all this wrestling from like a secondary lens, I suppose. So
I think so far the most interesting thing I've been able to take away from Kinnikuman is like the random wrestling trivia that I can pick up on. Like there was late into the 7 Devil Choujin thing. They were doing like the chapter covers with famous wrestlers, and one of them was like, the retiring Terry Funk, and it was, and I'm thinking like, knowing who the guy is, I'm like, he didn't retire in the 80s. He's still doing stuff.
Jeez.
Or, even like, which like he's in his 70s. I don't know how much he's doing, but he'll still make appearances and whatnot.
I was about to say, like, holy shit, he's got to be
And so
pretty
like
old.
I think of the wrestler as like this old man, because that's whenever I've seen him around, he was in his 50s or older, if not. And so it's like, wow, this guy retiring in the 80s, like it's just interesting to see that kind of perspective on things.
Yeah, and maybe like, he did like temporarily, but he got back into it because you can
leave
wrestling, but the wrestling never leaves you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. So, and yeah, because I definitely noticed that when it's like, oh yeah, here's this Kinnikuman character with the real wrestler. Like I reckon they and I think they even mentioned at times like, yeah, this is just a real wrestler, like in the notes and stuff. But yeah, you actually recognize the wrestlers from seeing them and such. So yeah. But anyway, then we get to the actual fighting part of the tournament, in which there's only a couple I wanted to really talk about. Warsman fucking drinks T-Man.
Yeah, that's another one of those weirdly
like abstract but also horrifying.
Yeah, like if you think about it, it's like, oh, that's kind of dark.
Yeah, like it's stuff that I can't even say like, oh, they can only get away with this because it's cartoony, but it's like, no, they also kind of just do really violent stuff, even though it's also cartoony, so it's not even that.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing where the cartoon violence makes it more violent in a way.
Yeah.
Because, like, if you don't think about it, it's like, oh, haha, the T-man obviously would be T. That makes sense. And that's kind of funny and kind of goofy. But then if you think about it from, like, trying to, like, immerse yourself in the, what's the word? Believability, but that's not the word I'm looking for.
Verisimilitude?
I don't know. Yeah, verisimilitude. You're like, hang on, this guy just got, like, his... Is that his life essence? His life essence was just drunk from his teacup skull?
Well,
what?
I mean, after the arc, there was like comments from all the wrestlers, so everyone has survived, even though it's like again with the Cube man, who was the Rubik's Cube guy. He like Rikishi like slaps him and he like swells up, and then he like goes to the crowd and gets popped and explodes, and I'm just like, that was horrifying. But then there's a comment by him afterwards like, I'll win next time, and it's like, how are you alive? Are you?
I thought one of the funniest things in the translator's notes was that the one crab guy comes back and he had like plastic surgery on his claw so he wouldn't lose in rock paper scissors. And there's a gag made out of that. But then he comes back later and he has his regular claw, and the translator was like, hey, wait a minute. I thought he got plastic surgery.
He got it again. So, no, I don't know. Yeah, I guess it was a little mistake, or, yeah, I didn't. I must have skimmed over that one. But anyway, the first fight I actually wanted to really talk about, like just to skip over, Kinnikuman versus the Cobra guy, or Rikishi Man versus the Cube Man, was Ramen Man versus Brocken Man.
Yeah, I would say
Brocken Jr. Sorry.
I would say that was kind of like the only thing for this arc up until I guess more towards the end. Like the whole narrative with Ramen Man was neat. He was kind of the only character that I had like any level of investment in. I wouldn't call it a strong level of investment, but I was like, it's a thing of like a lot of the matchups earlier on were just gags and figuring out like there wasn't much of like a grand narrative within it. It kind of like builds over time, I guess. Whereas there was something pre-established with Ramen Man. So I wouldn't call it like great. Like I wasn't like, wow, I'm impressed with this. But it's like, okay, there's a story here I can follow. So therefore I am intrigued.
Yeah, and I thought, I don't know, because Ramen Man was kind of had a couple like some weird like, well, he's like this, but he's also like this. At least in this stretch, I think it was relatively consistent throughout this stretch. Like, because he has been a heel, but he's definitely doing more like in this case with Brocken Man, he's like, oh, Brocken Man, you'll be stronger if you move past your vengeance, because like, which yeah,
like that was interesting. There's like a narrative there. There's a character theme development sort of moment there.
Yeah, which it kind of makes sense, because if Brocken Man is going to be like again in the like 7 Akuma Choujin, if he's going to be helping fight alongside him, if he only has anger for Ramen Man, then that's like that limits his power. So like if Ramen Man is like not only showing like I'm still way stronger than you, but also showing like, well, you have to get stronger for other reasons, not just me. So like maybe that could be a way that it goes. I don't know how the arc is gonna get resolved, but yeah, there's a thing there.
Also, his father was a literal Nazi. Maybe he's not someone who needs to be avenged.
True.
Like obviously, the story never considers that. It's more of just like a, I don't know.
Yeah,
making it. I don't know.
Yeah. No. Well,
why did I even bring it up? It wasn't even a funny joke.
Well, no, I mean the first time like that was when it was like revealed that Brocken was actually like a really brutal bad guy. It was just like with Ramen Man he was fucking like killing people, but with Brocken Man it's just like he's just punching a dude and it's like, oh shit, he's a Nazi. Like that's it's not really being dwelled on or explored, but it's definitely not a good thing. Oh yeah, speaking of that, apparently in Ultimate Muscle, I guess, because this was mentioned again by Box Story, aka Pablo, was that apparently like late because I mentioned like, oh yeah, there's no real moral introspection, but apparently during Ultimate Muscle there's a recurring character from like I guess this series who turned into like an abusive alcoholic because as a Choujin he only like exists for violence and he couldn't find anything else with his life. And I thought so they're actually like exploring more of that, the sort of I guess the ideas that they're sort of like doing, I guess more or less haphazardly here, which it made me more curious about the later stuff. So and then I will say there's two fights, like the one we're getting to and then the final one, that made me think of later later series. So but we'll talk about those. Yeah, I don't think I have that much to say about Warsman versus Pentagon or the toilet guy. Oh yeah, but there was Kinnikuman versus Rikishi Man. Did I have anything to say about that one? Oh yeah, I guess there was one thing I noticed where like Rikishi Man was fighting normally, but after a certain point he started to try and use tricks, and at that point is like where he ended up losing, I think. Yeah, like he tried to trick like, oh your little buddy's hanging out, and that's where he tried to ruse Kinnikuman, but it ended up not working out for him. So I just know, I guess, an honesty thing there. That was the only thing I really noticed.
It was a fight.
Yeah, it was a fight. Anyway, then you have Ramen Man versus Warsman, and I did kind of like how like Ramen Man, he's trying to fight Warsman, like even though he's super wounded, he's trying to do the best that he can so he can kind of like help Kinnikuman, because he does, he lost to Kinnikuman, so he does sort of have a respect for him on some level, and he also just gets like stabbed in the head and rendered like comatose, which of course comes up later. Oh, and so one thing I hadn't thought about before, because like we find out that Warsman is being like trained by Robin Mask, who is hiding his identity. Which I did think that was funny when like he removes his like mask and he's wearing another mask underneath, and that's when we recognize him. Yeah. For some reason I like that gag. Like I think I also mentioned that gag in Dressrosa in One Piece with Jesus Burgess, where he's just like he removes a paper bag and there's a mask underneath. But now we know who he is, and it's just such an absurd gag, but I like it. But like because there's the stuff with the prisoners where Warsman's like, okay, if you kill all if you can run past Warman, you'll be set free. And he kills all of them on death row except for the old one who wants to see his grandson. And Bibin recognizes his humanity, and like, she's trying to get him to like to push away from that. So like, Warsman, even though he is this cold calculating computer, and this really strong fighter, like he's also been trained by Robin Mask, and there's also moments that just sort of push him to be like that. Like there's during the weigh-in, there's the one kid who, like, because he was wearing the belt, and he was considering, I'll get rid of my bear claws, I'll get rid of these implements I use, so he could keep wearing the belt that she gave him. But then the kid like shits on him, and he he gets mad. So I don't know, Warsman. I generally like the Warsman stuff, especially during the fight.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. There's just not much for me to say about it. It was fine.
Well, I guess a part of like what I don't know. I guess one other thing is like Kinnikuman sort of gets burdened by the guilt of like where Ramen Man like hurt himself so much for his sake, which now he's got to deal with that. Like because he was about to run away. So, and I guess one thing I didn't know going in was a comparison between, apparently, some people have suggested that Kinnikuman versus Warsman was possible inspiration for Luffy versus Katakuri. And when I read it, I was like, okay, so you have like this imperfect one and this perfect one, and especially like the way Warsman sort of develops through the fight was also sort of one thing that happened with Katakuri. And I was like, oh, okay, I can see it. Because, like, Warsman, or what does he say at the end? Yeah, to me, fighting and killing were the same thing, but, you showed me something else. Because by fighting Kinnikuman, he was able to actually, like, enjoy fighting. And, without it just being for death and murder. And so he sort of had that positive development. Also, they introduced a weird thing where Kinnikuman, like, his pig face that he's constantly get mocked on is, like, actually just a mask.
See, I thought that was kind of interesting in the way that like up till that point there had been little gags of like his face falling off.
Oh yeah,
and then
right.
for it to kind of come back as like, oh, he has a mask. Like it was obviously different. Like his, like his mask or whatever wouldn't fall, like his skin wouldn't fall off, but like his eyes and stuff would fall off his face. So I thought it was kind of interesting that ended up being like, oh, he wears a mask. It's like, huh.
Right, so the mask is kind of fragile and like his eyes can just fall off, but he's still got his real eyes underneath there. Yeah, I didn't think about it like that actually.
The mask narrative is also
very wrestling.
Yeah, like I get it from the wrestling perspective, especially as like a luchador thing, like in Mexico. Maybe it's more than just Mexico, but I am familiar of it with Mexico. So if it's more general than that, I apologize.
Started, I imagine, or where the
but yeah, like the
whole derives from the luchador, right?
The thing like with Kinnikuman, it's like, oh well, if you lose your mask, then you'll have to kill yourself. You can't be the prince. They keep saying all these different things of like these negative, putting a lot of emphasis on the importance of the mask, and that's definitely very very wrestling, very yeah. So like I understand like from the. As far as like being kind of like connected to wrestling, I can appreciate it from that perspective, but I'm also like from a narrative lens, I'm like, why do I care? He has a mask. Okay. That hadn't been established. Like I don't have any investment in it. Like I don't care about what he looks like underneath. Like what is the, like you tell me that there's drama and that like, oh, there's a big weight on the mask, and I'm like, okay, that's fine. But like I'm not invested in it.
But what if underneath he's your aesthetic character? Oh, that was funny. I'm sorry. No,
that would be funny though.
I don't see Kinnikuman being very aesthetic for you though. So.
Well, what if it's maybe
what if
what's
it's
the
so
name?
anti-aesthetic it loops around and becomes aesthetic?
I guess that would also be interesting, but I'm thinking from like the perspective of Inosuke from Demon Slayer. He's got the boar mask, and then underneath he's like a beautiful femboy, and it's like,
you're like,
what if
Kinnikuman
is that?
You can't do that. You can't unmask this boar man and oh no, Inosuke who fucks. Like you can't do. I love your reaction to that because you're like, wait, hold on.
But yeah, that's my 2 cents on the whole mask thing. It kind of just gets thrown in out of nowhere, which I mean, like, I guess that's not inherently bad because things, like plot developments can happen out of nowhere and be good. It's just like there's nothing to really have me invested in it yet. But again, another commenter pointed out that I gave Bleach like a 5 initially, but I found it really interesting in hindsight. So like maybe. This mask development will lead to something, and I'll be like, oh, that was cool, and then I'll look back at this and be like, yeah, the setup, it was Galaxy Brain the whole time. I'm waiting for it. Waiting for Kinnikuman to get interesting.
But yeah, this is also the fight where we get Kinnikuman using his Kinniku Buster, which I actually did remember that. I know about that one because I remember, like, in one of the few Ultimate Muscle episodes I watched, there's, like, a meta around the Kinniku Buster and, like, countering it. And I remember, like, there was just one of the episodes I watched, they, like, went into explaining a lot of it. And for some reason, like, I hadn't thought about it before, but it's like, oh, I guess for some reason this episode stuck with me. And so, like, yeah, here it is, the Kinniku Buster. But yeah, I don't know. I like the fight. I'm not sure if it was my favorite fight in the series because, like I said, the Akuma Choujin arc became my favorite arc in like a few chapters.
I also think the thing that I couldn't remember where I had seen it from, but the Kinniku Buster, what? I can't even words. The Kinniku Buster is an interesting thing because I'm not 100% like I don't know if the move started here in this manga or if like a wrestler had used it before and then it ended up getting like popularized through Kinnikuman, or whether it was just a reference or something. But I have been familiar with this move before because I've seen, you'll see like various wrestling lists, like there'll be moves that are like, oh, banned wrestling moves or whatever because they're too dangerous to actually do in real life or whatever. And this was like one of those moves that I had been familiar with before, but I didn't like, I don't know like if the move started here or if it was more like a famous wrestler had used it and then Kinnikuman just kind of referenced that. Like I don't know where the move begins and ends.
I would assume here, but I really don't have an idea. Well, because
I think it would be really interesting if like this manga created this move and.
Mm-hmm. Well, because like looking at the actual move, like because I've actually seen it parodied in Daily Lives of High School Boys, where one of the characters like uses the Kinnikuman Buster on someone and really just like he just hurts himself because like look at the move for a second, okay? You take someone and you land on your butt. Like where your tailbone, like that's just gonna hurt you because now you have the extra weight of another person on you. Like it only makes sense like in a superhuman thing because it's like landing on a superhuman shoulder is probably gonna hurt worse than landing on the wrestling ring. So it's like you're breaking them against your shoulder in a way and using the weight of that. Like that it makes sense if you're a superhuman basically, but if you just doing it as a human being, like you're just gonna get more hurt than them. Because that was the gag. He like does the Kinnikuman Buster and then he's the one on the ground in pain and the other person's like fine, and it's because he absorbed all that weight onto his butt, and it's like, ow, don't do this.
Yeah, because it's they had seen it even described it in the manga as like it's bad for your neck, your spine. What else was it? There were like 3 different spots where it was like.
It says, it damages the neck, back, and hip of, I guess, the person it's used on. Because it's also using that weight and, like, pulling them, them for, like, bending them, inwards, sort of, where, it's,
It also makes me wonder, because there is a safer version of the move that people use called the Muscle Buster, which I don't know if it was, like, if it started here and that ended up being... Or it's basically, like, you lift them up in the same position, but you fall backwards instead of...
Oh, yeah.
Because it still looks pretty cool, but it's safer for both participants.
Parties,
obviously,
right.
You can still mess up the move, and it can be dangerous in that way. But yeah, I don't know.
That's why they're athletes who practice. But go
I
on.
am really interested as to like, did the move originate here, or did it get popularized here, or like where does this lore? How does this feed into the lore?
Yeah, I always assumed it was Kinnikuman, but again, that's where I first saw it because I would have seen that episode of Ultimate Muscle before I watched any wrestling or anything. I've never watched any wrestling, so but yeah, so I always just assumed. But yeah, you're right. I guess it could have been an actual wrestling move that was adapted. I guess to say one more thing about go on.
Well, no, you go ahead. Probably mine's just more like wrestling talk.
I find that interesting, but okay. I was just gonna say, like, I guess I thought because like Warsman is like the calculating one, but he wasn't able to calculate Kinnikuman's luck and his instinct and his willpower and stuff. Like all these like it is kind of like it's kind of I guess I in my notes I even commented like, oh, it's kind of just doing the Robin Mask fight again, but then I realized like, oh wait, Warsman is literally like a disciple of Robin Mask, so it's like it's like purposeful, like it's doing that fight again but expanding on it, where it's like Warsman it's just furthering because like in that fight I sort of noted how Kinnikuman is like he's the strength of someone who's only lost versus the pride of someone who's only won, and which became his weakness. But here you're exploring that sort of perfection and versus like failure and imperfection from a different angle and with some different stuff. So I kind of liked it, but I hadn't thought about it as like, oh yeah, he's literally a disciple of Robin Mask. And yeah, I guess for Robin Mask's arc, it's like, yeah, he was super prideful, Kinnikuman, and then he like had to beat Kinnikuman, and now he's sort of like fallen because of that, and like into this like the heelness, the heel side of things. So
yeah,
I don't know, I liked it though. So
my only other comment about wrestling moves was that like I don't know, the way that like wrestling, like new wrestling moves are invented, it's always like. I don't know, because something as basic as, like, a DDT only started happening in, like, the 70s or the 80s, which is basically where you just, like, hook the guy's head, like, underneath your arm, and then just, like, slam him like, head first into the mat. Like, that's a super basic thing. It seems like it would have been around for a while, but it only started being used by... one particular wrestler in, like, the 80s or maybe the 70s. I don't know how far back it goes.
Because maybe it was, like, because it was basic, they didn't think it was cool or flashy enough. I don't know, because, wrestling is
like
very much
something
a
like
show.
Whereas, like, the Kinnikuman Buster, it seems more flashy. So it's like, I don't know, maybe it did originate... Like, figuring out where these wrestling moves originated, it wouldn't surprise me if it started here, but it wouldn't surprise me if it started elsewhere, because... I don't know how people come up with these moves. It's just like, I don't know, what gives people the ideas.
Yeah, I couldn't. Yeah, I have no. That's a good line of thought. It's interesting. I guess there was also like it's not quite a popularity poll. Well, we did actually skip over one last time because I completely forgot about it. Where it's like it was basically like the most popular characters outside of Kinnikuman for some reason. I don't remember who ranked where honestly at this point. But there was like it looked like the authors sort of going over their favorite fights or their best bouts in the Olympics.
Yeah.
With, number one was Kinnikuman versus Warsman. Number two was Ramen Man versus Brocken Man. So it's sort of what I guess I feel like what they I don't know, maybe they were voted. That didn't seem to be clear to me. It seems like the authors decided. I don't know. It's just interesting to see their thoughts on it. And
and I thought it was interesting because it was basically like a whole chapter dedicated to essentially like a popularity poll type thing, or dedicated to like recap in certain ways, which it's not that it doesn't happen in manga, but you don't or
not
maybe I just haven't read enough
chapter.
manga, but like like a full recap chapter, like a recap episode in an anime, certainly not something I'm super familiar with.
Apparently,
but then again, maybe I just haven't
like,
read enough manga.
Apparently in Gintama there is a small popularity poll arc where Madaka Box actually has a popularity poll because there's a character who's sort of like he's known in the narrative for like always losing, like he's the eternal loser, but he wins the popularity poll. And that actually has like meta effects on the story, which, like, it's so. Manaka Box is interesting, but obviously this is also like 30 years before either of those. So.
Yeah. No, that does sound interesting though. Like you would think that if that was going to be factored in on like a narrative level, it would be these stories that are more meta in general, or are more like trying to provide some sort of commentary on the thing. Like you'll see recap very, panels like, and stuff, actually, I guess now that I think about it, One Piece kind of did something. Well, okay, no, yeah, One Piece had some like with Reverie, there were like recap sections, but it wasn't quite the same. Because what I was thinking of were in the Viz volume releases, where there were like actual recap pages like sprinkled in between.
Gotcha.
Whereas in the actual chapters, like there were recap sections, but it wasn't
like a little. Here's like a page that has a bunch of panels. Like, oh, here's this thing that happened, but then that's like in between the actual like character introduction that's going on right then. Yeah, I get. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not quite in the same vein as this, where this is literally like a and granted the chapters are shorter, so maybe it works better that way. But even then, like I don't know if it's necessarily per the shorter chapter lengths, because they probably could have done this exact same thing for another 8 pages or whatever. Like, why not? So I don't know. It just seems in spirit with the manga. So yeah, it's interesting in that way.
But there's also the page that I mentioned, where it's like you have all the wrestlers, commenting, and it's like, yeah. So the Cube Man who fucking exploded is like, the champion belt is too small to fit on my waist. Until next time, I'll be working on fixing that. Like, okay, he's alive enough to comment, unlike Brocken Man who couldn't comment, Ramen Man who couldn't comment because Watchman is still for repairs. So basically, it sort of takes like I guess it takes kind of like almost not maybe like a One Piece-ish approach where it's like okay they're alive until said otherwise almost.
I guess now that I think about it, this arc was also kind of interesting in that maybe not like the role of like main sort of rival almost kind of shifts from Terry to Ramen Man. Whereas Terry just kind of becomes like the more best friend kind.
Warsman, or who do you mean? You said Robin Mask. I don't know who you're talking about.
No. I was thinking Ramen Man because like he is the other sort of protagonist character who has like an arc going
Man.
through.
I heard Robin Man and I was like Robin Mask.
No, Ramen Man, because like he does have roles later, like and especially in the Seven Devil Choujin thing, when he ends up like teaming up with Kinnikuman, but he's like this ominous presence in the background, whereas like Terry is just kind of the best friend guy who's also fighting alongside the protagonist, but it's less so anymore that they're potentially going to come to blows, whereas there's still more of like that competitiveness, I think. And between the other two.
Yeah, well, I assume you're referring to because there was a whole page in that chapter of all the fights and stuff where it gives some hypothetical dream some hypothetical dream matchups where it's like, what if Terry Man and Kinnikuman fought? What if Ramen Man and Robin Mask fought? What if Warsman and Brocken Jr. fought? Which was kind of neat. Like,
I guess in that sense, it's also neat from like a shonen legacy perspective influence that we do get comments later that like, oh, where does Kinnikuman get all these allies? Like, what is it about him that draws these people to him? That's very shonen.
That's
power
a very
of friendship.
shonen trope, right? Like I've even like fucking Aikatsu has that where they mention like, oh, Ichigo has this ability to draw allies around her, and I'm like, oh, this is an idol show meant for young girls. This is just a shonen now. Like,
because like to compare this to like Ashtana Joe, like Joe is influential, but it didn't really have like a power of friendship minds, like in the sense that like
he was
he has his rivals,
people, but they didn't surround him and support him in the same way that like because like as I pointed out, the only person who really supported him in was Yoko, and maybe some of his rivals like Carlos and Rikishi and stuff, but.
It's just not really the kind of setting where like people can fight on Joe's behalf. Whereas with Kinnikuman, he has like this whole crew of people who are like fighting with him and that sort of thing. So it's different. It's a different dynamic
because they're like rivals because they're fighting each other, but also like when the actual threat comes, they're gonna team up. Also, the scan quality gets worse for a little bit.
Yeah, I did like the little translator's notes where it's like, sorry, I couldn't find a better page, so I had to reuse or there was like a page got lost or whatever, so I had to use the old scans.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which I'm also curious, because again, like I'm reading this on a website where like some of the like, do you have
the chapters are redone? You're right.
Yeah. Okay. I didn't know if that had happened with you too, because I knew like earlier on I had seen some of the newer.
The first chapter of the Akuma Choujin arc, where Kinnikuman's partying and he accidentally goes to space and really that one, the entire one was in bad scans.
Yeah.
Did you have that whole chapter? Just like one page of that chapter?
I think it was the whole thing, but like there were other little spots sprinkled throughout where I remember it being like, oh, here was a bad page or a page got lost.
Gotcha. Because for me, because it actually like looking through, it's actually going through like through the cassette man fight, through the black hole guy fight. Like all of those are bad scans. So. So for you,
honestly, maybe it was a problem for me too, and I just didn't register it. I don't know.
Okay, because it like looking through, it's starting. It like I don't know. Yeah, it actually I think it stays that way through the whole thing, or most of it. It got a little better around like 24 chapters in. I don't know. It's not great. But it was, the translation was readable, and like that's probably the most important thing. Like, can I read it and understand it?
Yeah, thank God we're not getting scans like that one Joe page, which is just completely gone.
Like all those digital errors and yeah. But anyway, the arc starts and it's like, oh man, did you, we have all these strong Choujin, but what about the 7 Akuma Choujin? That are luckily they're trapped in space, and then Kinnikuman accidentally goes to space and fucking hits the release the Akuma Choujin button, and it's just so. Like, I don't know, I kind of appreciate the lack of fucks given on part of the authors. They're just like, yeah, Kinnikuman fucked up and released the antagonists of the arc, and here we go. Also, it was kind of weird because there's like, we're the 7 Akuma Choujin, and one of them is a butt, one of them is America, and then like 3 of them just get replaced, like without comment. Because like there's a whole page where we see a bunch of more submitted Choujin designs, and like see, at the time I thought it was funny because it's like where are they? I thought there was Mongol man, location or home country unknown, and I was like, do you think it could be Mongolia? But then it turns out like there's actually something going on there with Mongol man, so it actually makes sense in retrospect. But I only realized that just like looking through just now, and I was like, oh yeah.
It was almost one of those like Obito level reveals where it's so obvious, and then the author's like, no, actually it's not. Because he's like, oh, it's not Ramen Man, it's Mongol Man, and it's like, oh, okay, are you? I'm not buying it. And it does turn out to be Ramen Man, which like it's another one of those things where it's like I wouldn't call that a bad thing that I knew it was Ramen Man because he still had an interesting role in the arc, but it was just kind of interesting on that
See,
level.
I was kind of along with the pace. Like, I was like, oh my god, it's Ramen Man, of course. And it's like, wait, it's Manga Man? What the fuck? I don't understand. Well, because I think what I was thinking of is like, because there's this page with all the wrestlers, and I thought, oh, are all these guys like, I wasn't, like there are only 6 Devil Choujin, but seeing this page, I was like, wait, are there more of them? And like, is Manga Man secretly an Akuma Choujin who's now working with the? So I was like speculating on it in a different direction because of something I didn't understand. So when it actually turned out to be Ramen Man, I was like, oh, okay, that makes more sense. But I wasn't. For me, it wasn't a Tobi Obito thing. When I guess it probably should have been, but oh well. But anyway, they set up the conflict. They break Meat into multiple pieces, and you've got to beat all of us to reassemble Meat and save his life.
I was super invested in this conflict.
Oh no, the mascot character will die. Sad. Yeah, I get you.
I think there's also still like a bit of tonal dissonance I'm having with the story here, and I'm not sure why that is, because other stories have done the switch from comedy to more serious stakes, and I haven't had issues with it.
Well, I guess what's different about Kinnikuman compared to literally every series we've done is like if you read the first chapter of Kinnikuman, it's all gag, and the series is pretty much like that for several volumes. Like there's no real serious narrative. Where like what happens in the first chapter of One Piece? Shanks loses his arm and Luffy's crying over it. What happens in the first chapter of Naruto? He's this like bullied, outcasted, like monster. First chapter of Bleach is like, oh shit, my massive spiritual power has attracted this monster to my house, and now my family's in danger. Like they're all
first chapter of Yu Yu Hakusho, Yusuke dies.
Yeah, he fucking dies. Like even Fairy Tail and Rave, like first chapter of Fairy Tail, Lucy's about to get sold into slavery. First chapter of Rave Monster is dealing with like the end of the world, or like this apocalypse, this previous fight of the previous
I've
Rave
saved
Master.
The world.
And,
no.
Like, and that was probably the goofiest first chapter we've read so far. But like, it's still a marked difference for Rave Master, but it's still a marked difference from a literal gag series. So maybe that just it hasn't clicked with you because with that in that way quite yet because of that, like where, and it is because it is still using that gag, like in the Warsman fight, which is one of my favorite fights so far. Like Warsman rips off Kinnikuman mask and is like, oh, there's no rule against having multiple masks, and it's like, okay, shut you, you motherfucker. And of course, I love how I put a helpful, this is the last mask that I have sign on the last mask that he had. Like, and there was another one moment where I think one of the, like, in one of the coffin matches where, like, or there was a referee and, not, like, who got killed and put into one of the coffins, and he has a name tag, it's like, I'm the referee, or something like that. Just, like, really directed. Just to make sure that the audience knows. But yeah, that's also kind of including gag stuff in like even more serious moments. So I guess I can understand why there's more of that dissonance. Like, because I remember you even bringing it up, maybe not as a problem, but like with how One Piece, where like there was an arc to how like Luffy kind of isn't giving a fuck for a lot of the fights in the early part of the series, and you were still into it, but that was something you noted as like. The stakes maybe aren't quite there because, like, here's this goofy rubber man who's kind of not giving a fuck as he fights these, like, really serious and bad threats, And so, and this kind of has, like, I guess that on some level where it's just goofier stuff with more serious stuff. So, yeah, I understand where you're coming from.
And I guess it's also, like, the means through which the combat is executed, like I don't know how I'd really describe like a power system in Kinnikuman, like other than like, oh hey, I recognize wrestling moves. It doesn't have the same level of like, I'm watching a wrestling match, so I'm invested in like the technical skill of it or whatever. Which, again, it's one of those things where like I don't know how to like criticize what it's doing because all sorts of like combat stories would have that degree of like some people might invest in the way that the combat's being executed, some people might not, and I'm not. At the moment, I don't have, like, I'm not quite sure what it is that's not clicking with me, like, how to describe it as, like, something unique.
I mean, I guess, like, one thing I have thought about regarding, I guess, the power system is, it's a very soft power system, where what I mean by that is, like Hunter x Hunter, One Piece, Naruto, Bleach, they have very hard power systems with these, well, maybe Bleach a little less so, because, like, all the characters do have different powers, but there's still, like, there's rules, and mechanics that we like understand, and the series is generally expected to follow these rules, you know, like chakra and devil fruits and Nen. Where Kinnikuman, it's a very loose power system where it's like, yeah, like, okay, Kinnikuman can just eat garlic and become giant. Cassette Man can just like kill people with sound and music played at insanely high volumes. Like it just and then it'll just, and like it just sort of adds it does things very loosely and freely, and you know, yeah, there's not a lot of verisimilitude there, and maybe part of that is the appeal for some people, because it does, like I've mentioned this about, I think, Dragon Ball before, because I feel like something about how it'll just like include devils and aliens and high tech sci-fi and magic, and it's just like there, like it's a softer world. But it's also very, compared to like, say, One Piece, which grounds it more like, oh, there's all this high science, but it's all connected to Vegapunk, and there's all this magic-looking fantasy stuff, but it's actually science, you know, like, Dragon Ball's a bit more whimsical in that way. So with Kinnikuman, yeah, it's a bit more fun and whimsical, and it can do the gag stuff easier, you know. But if that's not your thing, that's perfectly fine, especially when like, what you do really like Naruto and One Piece and especially Hunter x Hunter series that do have these harder, you know, worlds and power systems. So maybe that's just more to your liking. Where Kinnikuman, again, it's very Rave is also, I guess, on the looser side.
It might also be something that like maybe I just need more time for it to like grow on me, because I think also back to like Bleach, when I initially had a problem with, oh, these characters are bleeding all over the place and they're getting cut with swords and not really taking much damage, like they're still fighting, whereas you know, I can't really connect to that. But over time you kind of acclimate to that, like, okay, these characters can take all this damage and lose all this blood and it's not really a problem.
Yeah, right.
And so maybe that's a factor. Yeah. Like maybe I'll grow into this looser. I don't know.
Yeah, well, I mean, I did reread Bleach recently, and like one thing about that specifically is that like they do mention that like, you know, wounds to the head are like more debilitating. Like if you want to kill a Soul Reaper, you go for the head, which is also true for Hollows, and they're like, because they're not that different power wise, you know. So it's like there's like a connection there. But it's grounding that with rules, so maybe that's part of why you're able to more accept it over time. With Kinnikuman, it doesn't have as many rules, you know. But anyway, as for the first fight, Kinnikuman versus the cassette guy, I guess what I kind of noticed that it was sort of set that it did actually be like the series, the arc was pretty consistent with, was this sort of idea of like reliant, like you'll notice a lot of the Akuma Choujin, you know, use the environment to their advantage. So with you know, the cassette guy, he, you know, the Tokyo Tower, which is a broadcasting station, and so you have like all these guys who rely on these advantages. And then, of course, because they're relying on other things, they're not as able to deal with, you know, the, like, again, the sort of reliance versus, relying on only oneself that I think I mentioned before, like in Dragon Ball, how, like, Cell or Boo will absorb power from other sources, or, you know, the fishmen in the Fishman Island, Hody Jones, they use, like, drugs to get power. Like, they're relying on these other sources, so they're not really able to stand up to the protagonists who only are, you know, using their own power. So yeah, with the cassette man, it's like, yeah, he's playing music from the Tokyo Tower. So when the program ends and switches to just news or something, he's like, oh no, and Kinnikuman's able to beat him. And also, like, he uses these tapes that have all these other fighting styles, and he loses when he uses the Kinnikuman tape from 3 years ago, and it's like, oh shit, what have I done? So you know, I thought, and that kind of, like, I noticed that setup go through basically, maybe not every single one, but a lot of them. Like with the Atlantis man, he had the water and stuff going on. So, you know, just like, which maybe that helped me like the fights a little bit more, because it's more than just like a ring with two fighters. Because, like, you know, obviously Ashton is just a sports series, but like it had these rules of boxing, so there's like that level of technique and, you know, again, a hard, almost a hard power system. Like, that's not quite accurate, but a system that it's using for its fights that we can like get and understand. Where, like, with Kinnikuman, maybe it's like, you know, the ring and the ring outs, you know, haven't been that big, but like this one uses the environment more, and I think I appreciated that a bit more.
I think this was also, I think this was the fight where I remember there being, like, Kinnikuman does like a Boston Crab, and I'm like remembering the Ojamaja Doremi thing, and I'm like, are you sure it's not a reverse Tombstone Pile Driver? I will never forgive that translation.
Well, it's like, because I'm pretty sure you said like what they would have said would have been closer to, you know, crab, but it's so they like literally just made something up, or how did they make that mistake?
Yeah, I don't know.
Oh yeah, and now okay. I don't have as much to say about the black hole fight. I did because like Terry Man sort of like steps in, but so, but he doesn't like fight the black hole guy. He just gets like ganged up on and beaten. He gets the shit beaten out of him, which I thought was kind of like, okay, you're having Terry Man do something in the story, but again, it doesn't like see like, oh look, he's because if he just fought black hole and got beaten, then it's like, oh yeah, he's just weaker than Kinnikuman, that kind of thing I was saying earlier. But instead, since he got ganged up on, there's no like, well yeah, of course that's gonna happen. It would happen to anyone. So it's just like, again, I like all the ways that it keeps Terry Man like relevant, even if he's not like having these major like moments or fights in the same way. But yeah, I guess I wasn't as into this fight because my only real note is like, oh, I don't know, I was in pain because of the white hole, where it's like, oh, if a black hole sucks everything up, then a white hole that creates matter is and it's Kinnikuman farting, and it's just like, hello darkness, mild friend, like, oh no. Just
yeah, it's definitely one of those, it's a gag which is very, like the fight kind of centers around it, like it's the deciding moment of the fight, and so I definitely get it. It's like you kind of just have to accept it. That's Kinnikuman.
Well, not even just Kinnikuman, it's Shounen in general. Like what Naruto does something similar,
Well, oh yeah. Like there are moments. So yeah, it's definitely not unique to Kinnikuman, but it's one of those things that like you might not like it, but
and
you can't like say, oh, the manga would be better if it didn't have it, because like that just is the style of Kinnikuman. So it's like you kind of just have to. There's been a lot
of like scatological and dirty humor like that. So it's like, and winning a fight with it isn't even like. Yeah, again, Naruto does something, like, not as extreme, obviously, because it is a more grounded series, but it does do it, more or less. And my stance on it is, like...
Naruto just ripped off Kinnikuman!
And my stance on it has always been, like, even if I don't like it, like, if I understand, like, yeah, it's a series made with children in mind. Oda might have found this the funniest shit he's ever read. I don't know, because there's fart jokes in One Piece too, and I don't like those either. Like, my favorite series ever still has like little moments in humor that I don't like. Like, the example I always think about is literally like it would be my favorite episode of Lupin Ranger vs. Pat Ranger, where it has this great exploration of Lupin Red, one of the main characters. But also the monster is like a fart monster, and there's like a minute-long fight sequence where he's farting all over the other Rangers. And so it's like I remember the first time watching it, and I just felt like my soul was dying the longer it went on. And otherwise, even like the fact that it was farts is like he lit the city on fire, and that tied into like a moment where the cop ranger gave the thief ranger a fire truck so they could go like put out the fire and save the city, which was the
real Super Sentai watch order is you start with this episode and then go from there.
Start with the fart episode, right? So it's like, on one hand, this is literally like, it has some great writing and literally some excellent character exploration that made me like recontextualize how I thought about Lupin Red, that character. But also there's a fart monster, so like anything good I could say about it is also backed by like, oh, there's a fart monster. So it's like I tend to like these stories aimed at children, but also there's still stories aimed at children. And for me, like, I'm gonna go like, I don't like that, and move on. But it is something I have to think about as an adult who spends a lot of time talking about stories that are made for children. And so like, that's my take on it. Like, if you like it, great. If you don't like it, like, I wouldn't get too mad over it, because again, it is a series made for kids, and like that's just not my personal taste. But at least not that specific kind of stuff. But yeah, there was moments I liked in the fight, like just the Kinnikuman sort of, like, again, the environment comes up with the shadows, and Kinnikuman has to come up with counters and stuff. Like, the fights were a bit more technical, I feel like, in this stretch, because of the way that it would use environment and the powers and stuff. But yeah, that was probably my least favorite one. Also, I feel like the fights were meatier. Like, there was just they just tended to be longer.
Yeah, they were longer, but I don't know if there's still really a particular fight. Or I was like, I was invested, or I don't know. I like things just kind of happened, and that was like my stance.
Yeah, no, I get you. If you're not gonna be invested, then that's I get it. Like, because this is where I like, specifically when like, because there was the whole like sort of sub thing going on with the injury management, where it's how Kinnikuman would get hurt having in these brutal fights and need time to recover, and in order to give him time to recover, well, the other, like there's this part, like this is when I decided, like, oh, I think this is my favorite arc of the series so far, and it's when Terry Man, Wars Man, Rikishi Man, Brocken Jr., and Robin Mask all step in to fight the remaining members of the Akuma Choujin to give Kinnikuman time to rest, and like they're even like, they're all prepared to die for Kinnikuman and meat, which again is burdening Kinnikuman because he's not strong enough to fight all these guys alone, and I don't know, I liked it.
No, yeah, it's something. It's I don't know. Like it's also I don't know, because it's also a moment I've seen in other shonen before. Like the allies standing up, and I guess it's just an instance where like I've seen other stories do it in more interesting ways. I don't know, for whatever reason, nothing about this is just particularly clicked with me. Mm-hmm. Like there were moments where I was like, oh, the series has a pulse. I can feel something where I'm like not totally disinterested, but there was never like maybe there were like I think the most invested I was ever like throughout the stretch is when like Ramenman was doing anything. Like I guess there was something kind of interesting in the whatever happened with Robin Mask, and like his girlfriend came back and he died and she got his mask, and there was like a moment there, but I don't know, there's just not much for me to say about it.
Yeah, well, I'll keep talking. And we'll
I
see
wish I could make this podcast more interesting, but with this particular
okay.
series,
it's just Fairy Tail Round 2. It's okay, Mathwiz. Can't wait for
I feel like I had more interesting things to say about Fairy Tail, though.
I mean, I think it's just like, yeah, we are like our tastes are more modern, where that's just the series that we like. First, Dragon Ball, Naruto, One Piece, like those. That's or me with One Piece, obviously you less so, but like that's where we kind of got our foot in the door, and of course, we're probably gonna be more interested in things that are more like that. So, and this is like, I don't know. Like Ashina Joe isn't even like, it isn't modern, but it's also very like ahead of its time in a few ways. Like just the way like what it was doing with like the character drama and stuff was still interesting even today, I think, like in what it was doing story wise, where this is like not that, nearly in the same way. So, but like there was some comments like that the writing has evolved. It's just like we're not going to be reading Ultimate Muscle or Kinnikuman the second run. So it's like, well, we don't get to read the best stuff so far. But I don't know. Maybe when Ultimate Muscle gets translated, we're probably gonna come back to Kinnikuman, and Mathwiz is like, no, why did Kinnikuman have to be the 100-volume series that we read on the Nen Show? Because it is like one of the longer series. Because it's been ongoing basically since they, I think there was like a several year long break between the end of Kinnikuman and the start of Ultimate Muscle, but then since then it's basically been going since. So,
well, at the very least, we'll probably the first series with 100 volumes we'll read. It will probably be One Piece, and then
which will happen first? Will Wano end, or will Ultimate Muscle and it be translated? Who knows? Because that's actually more up for debate than I'd like to admit. But anyway, so I guess to talk about something a bit more general shonen is, so we get the fights, like we get Rikishi Man versus Spring Man, and again the environment kind of comes into it where like, Rikishi Man sort of packs the sand, which was working to his advantage before, but then it doesn't after a while. Or I think, yeah, because then Springman's able to bounce in, and Rikishi Man fucking gets destroyed and literally explodes into pits. And like other than that, I was like when Robin Mask drowned and Warsman, died standing up, I was like, I could see them still being alive, but
yeah.
So, well, because they all came back in the end, because like I kind of figured like Robin Mask in particular wasn't going to die because he's too important, I feel.
Yeah.
But so I wasn't sure how they're gonna handle it, but then it's like, oh, they just come back, and it's like, well, there it is. Characters don't die in shonen.
It was also like with this arc, I don't know really how to describe it, but I kind of got the feeling that like, oh, this character wouldn't die here because this arc doesn't feel grandiose enough to warrant a character death. But it's like, well, it was like 30-something chapters, which by this stretch in the manga, like I guess the Choujin Olympics kind of rival it in length, but so it is like one of the, as far as like this manga has established, it has scale, but for me to be like, oh no, it doesn't have enough weight,
Yeah, like, and I do kind of like because I'm starting to enjoy it myself. But as far as like that comment that said like, oh, if you don't like it by this point, you probably won't. Like, yeah, I'm not sure what the series could do more to make you like it. And I don't know, maybe it's like I'm trying to think of like what, because it is pretty like hyper masculine and there's like like they're all super muscular. But then you like wrestling, so maybe that's not it. Like, I don't know, I'm just wondering, like, what is it specifically that you don't like about it, aside from... But and maybe it's harder because we haven't quite read something like this in the same way, even though it is this familiar... Like, yeah, it has, like, again, the characters dying, coming back. I brought that up because it's something we're very familiar with.
Yeah, like, that. It's not even like I dislike that the character... Because, I've gone on record with other series that, like, oh, it was a character death fake out, and that didn't really bother me. Whereas like some people get really bothered by fake outs like that. So it's not like this series did anything unique in that regard to be like, oh no, I didn't like this. But it's just like, I guess like its general aesthetic and, me kind of being disconnected from the fights, and a lot of it just kind of bounces off me. There hasn't been
a character you clicked with yet, really, right?
At least like, with Bleach, because, while we were reading Bleach, I wasn't super into it. But at least like Bleach had like Kubo's artwork. Gin existed in Soul Society, so there was like something for me to latch onto. I guess the series has Ramen Man, but like he's not. Even then, it's more just like, oh, he had a story. That's why I was invested in him. Like, it's not like, oh, he had a super gripping. I don't.
Yeah, no. So I don't know. Maybe if there is more of like a character, like, I don't know. Maybe that'll help if something happens with Kinnikuman like that. So I don't know.
I hope it doesn't. I hope the series doesn't end with me calling it Kinniku Mid, because it's. I want to like it. I want to like the series. I don't want to not like stuff, but it's gonna have to do more to.
No, yeah,
to grip
like
me.
You're not. We all want to like things, but no one's obligated to like something. So, except One Piece, no. Oh yeah, also there was the superstition thing where like Terry Man's shoelaces kept snapping as sort of people, other Choujin fell.
I was waiting for that to lead to some like, not necessarily goofy, but like all his shoelaces would snap, and then the cause of his defeat would be his shoe. He tripped or his shoe fell off or something, but that didn't happen.
Well, I did think about, because we talked about during Naruto where like Tsunade's teacup would crack, and that was one of the moments we think back to where we're like kind of nitpicking and saying things that we wouldn't normally say, because like but I guess to respond to like, because that seems like something that could have been led to a gag, but also like I guess that is an actual superstition, so it was like it was actually that it led to drama with Terry Man sort of like because he's like, oh no, everyone's falling. He kind of like, powers through and ends up beating Mountain Man. So, but then you also get because there was the other fights where Brocken Jr. versus Common Man, I think, the mummy guy, and Buffalo Man versus Wars Man. I guess mostly what happened with the Brocken Jr. fight is that you have Ramen Man sort of secretly helping. Which of course built into the later tag match.
I guess like with some of the fights too, it wasn't. I mean, at least like some of the characters, like there's a consistency as far as like they have a gimmick with how they fight, and they lose by way of something tied to their gimmick. Whereas like the guy who can like mummify people, Ramen Man just kind of like does his leg lariat thing, and.
Yeah, I guess that one doesn't factor as much into like the reliance and use of environment in the same way, or at least not with the way he loses. Because you're right. It just kind of gets beaten up.
I mean, there is like an intrigue with Ramen Man and Brocken Jr. How there's like I don't know, there was a message there, like moving beyond revenge, and Ramen Man kind of like stepping into this sort of mentor figure of sorts. Like, he's trying to kind of guide Brocken Jr. down like a better path. And so he's, like, coming to his rescue, and he's being described as, like, a savior. So that's kind of neat. But I guess it's more, like, there could be... like, there are pieces here that, like, could be built on. and there could be more intrigue to it. Like,
Yeah.
oh, if Brocken Jr. does something in the future, building off of the development that he was given a chance to have from Ramen Man, then like maybe there will be more like retroactive weight to these moments.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we'll see. But yeah, I guess I didn't have that much else to say about the other fights. But I mean, obviously with Warsman, you have like he breaks off the horn, which ends up helping Kinnikuman later, and also you have this is one of those moments that I have that's kind of like, oh shit, power levels get introduced, and you know this would have happened before Dragon Ball even started serialization. So there's like, okay, here's Kinnikuman being important and introducing things that and specifically in a way that, you know, people attribute to Dragon Ball when that's not the series where it came, where it was. Maybe Dragon Ball popularized it, especially in the West, but it, like, you know, it definitely wasn't the first one to use it, as Kinnikuman has showed us here. And if assuming that's not, like, because I've heard Saint Seiya, well, like Astro Boy has like horsepower because they're like robots and they do have like a, you know, like they're sometimes measured in their horsepower, I think. But this is a little bit like, you know, they're machines, and that's like something we can actually measure, where this is a more abstract, like, oh, they just have a power level. Yeah, it's just one thing I noticed where it's like, hey, I recognize that. And I also recognize where you know, people are wrong about that. Because again, Dragon Ball is the first Shounen after all. Never anything before Dragon Ball.
Nope. But also, it was, you know, you see power levels and it's one of those things where it's like, oh no. And like, it's another one of those things where like, I get the message it goes for in the end, that like, oh, the power levels aren't actually important. Like, you're missing the point if you rely purely on power.
Right, which is always the message in everything that uses them.
Yeah, that's also, I think, part of why, you know, like some people will say like, oh, Dragon Ball had this bad legacy because you get power scalers and people who only rely on, you know, who reflect on the narratives of like, oh, but what would have happened if these people fought these people? Or, you know, it's all about like the matchups and the power rather than like what the results of fights mean for the story.
Yeah, so, but like, also power levels have literally never mattered in anything that's ever used them. So.
Yeah. But like, you know, thinking about it from this perspective, like whenever I see power levels introduced into a story, I already kind of have an idea of where it's gonna go. Like, you know, Dragon Ball does something neat with it as far as, you know, the Scouters are involved, and so there's a difference in characters relying on more natural developed skill, like being able to sense energy, whereas the people who rely on the technology aren't able to do that. And so there's a difference of...
And also being
there's
able
like
to...
an idea...
Like the protagonists can manipulate their power level because it's like threat level. They're not always going to be threatening, where like, you know, Vegeta can't lower his power level at the start of the series. Frieza can't. Like, they're just always... you know, right, there's different things they could do with it. Yeah,
I was going to say, like, it's an idea, but, you know, like, obviously this has an idea behind it too, but it's more of like a...
It's a familiar idea.
I'm trying to think something deeper than just having a message behind it. Like, there's a multi-layered message, maybe? Because, like, there's, like, a difference in, like, ideology and the way that people act on... No, because that also happens here. I don't know how to describe it. One is just more interesting than the other, I guess.
Yeah, well, and I guess
like
the
a very
thing with
minor
power
way.
levels is also that like it's something introduced, and also it's like also not supposed to matter, like even though it is introduced, like, which is kind of like, I don't know, it is kind of a weird thing to like as a writing technique to do that, but you know, also like even, you know, like Warsman is able to like strengthen himself over, you know, 10 million by like doing certain techniques and stuff, and then like later Buffalo Man's able to like lower his power level and move faster because of it. Like there's you know, fuckery going on to so yeah, it's, I don't know, it's neat. It's and yeah, I'm like, now this is also part of one of the reasons why I wanted to read it, because it's like, now it's like that, look, there it is, power levels. I know for a fact that a series before Dragon Ball has used this trope. And, like a popular and influential one too. So it's like, there it is. Okay, that's kind of one of the things I wanted. Like, I already had tournaments. Now I just need transformations. When is Kinnikuman gonna go Super Saiyan? It
definitely makes me think of like the what is it? The Stefan Krosik's video on like the escalation problem in Shounen. And it's like, oh, you know, Dragon Ball had this problem with stakes. but I'm already kind of getting like a vibe with it here with Kinnikuman, because it's another degree to which like things being loose, like there are pros and cons to it, because like it's unpredictable, you don't quite know where things are gonna go. But like with Kinnikuman, like we've already had the Choujin Olympics, which like brings all the people from like the world into this place, but then it's like, oh no, there's got to be something bigger than that, and so you have like the Devil Choujin, who are, you know, these super strong people outside of the world, but then it's like, okay, how do you go bigger than that?
Well, I'd actually say Kinnikuman's been pretty good about it, because even after Kinnikuman won the 20th Olympics, like the whole point of doing the tour, the American tour, was like, yeah, there's still a bunch of Choujin who don't go to the Olympics who are still really strong. And then with the Akuma Choujin, it's like, yeah, they're stronger, but also part of that is because they're willing to do things that actual Choujin won't do. Like they'll cheat more. They'll do, because you know, they'll use, like, again, they use the environment like in ways. So they're stronger, but that's also because they have less standards.
So you're saying there's something of like an ideological difference there, and so there's more of like a meaningful thematic clash.
Well, something about
the reason for things
like,
to escalate.
Well, I mostly think about this through of all things Pokemon types, but something that you will see often is sort of like, you know, trickery and unfairness versus honesty, and sort of like, to go back to Pokemon, you have like dark types. There's moves like Beat Up, Bite, you know, like, and if you think about these in wrestling contests, that's unfair, dirty play. But then you have fighting type, which is, you know, that's the more like the refined, the reserved, the martial arts. And which one wins? Fighting beats dark. Like someone who's just better at martial arts will always beat a cheater, basically, is sort of the ideology there. And so like, and I guess that's kind of what this arc is. It's like you have these fighting, maybe I mentioned this last time, but you have these fighting types versus these fighting dark types. And guess what's super effective against dark? You know, so yeah, but they're also really strong again, like, which of course, like, that's just you know, like, because they are supposed to be really strong, but I don't know. I think it's been fine with the power scaling so far, at least as far as escalation and stuff. But we will see. I
mean, like, I guess for me it's different, because like, if I'm already not invested in the method that all this is being conveyed with, for it to continue escalating, there's like more. I already have a disconnect to like just expand.
So
with the power escalation, there's a disconnect escalation. I don't know.
And I'd also say that there's like, there's like in the 7 Akuma Choujin, it's like, you know, you have like all these other, you know, all of Kinnikuman's allies like hurting themselves and dying for his sake, and, you know, feeding his insecurity and stuff. So I'd say like that's a little bit stronger than it was in previous arcs. You know, like because after he beat Warsman, he's like he's respecting Warsman as this opponent. You know, he had the girl who likes him also paying a lot of attention to Warsman, and like I didn't feel like it was romantic, but she definitely cared a lot about Warsman's humanity, and like, but also she wasn't paying a lot of attention to Kinnikuman, and or at least not as much. So it's like, I don't know, I feel like it's also been getting more personal as the stakes have been increasing, but I don't know, I think it's fine so far. But I also understand that, like, yeah, when you're not invested, you tend to want more, and maybe that leads your mind to thinking about, oh, what if it was like this? Maybe I'd like it more if it was like this, you know, that kind of thing. Because I've definitely felt that going through stuff, but...
Yeah, I guess it's kind of interesting, because we're both kind of describing it as fine, but for you it's more like it's a good fine, whereas me it's kind of like
I'd probably give it like a 6 now, honestly. Like, but I could see it going up, especially like someone described the more recent Kinnikuman stuff as like some of the best written shonen stuff they'd seen, and I was like, that sounds interesting. Maybe it could go up to 7.
It's just the Bleach dynamic all over again.
Kinnikuman's actually sorry, Mathwiz, we couldn't understand Kinnikuman because we don't have the Buddhist symbolism.
Are we gonna have the other? Am I gonna make a Kinnikuman video and you're gonna promise Kinnikuman videos and eventually? Oh no,
that's not fair. I have a video coming out soon. Stop bullying me. It's coming out soon. I swear. Like, actually, probably before this episode comes out or around the same time. Yeah, it will, actually.
Ooh. You're gonna make me look dumb.
Yeah, it's gonna be real awkward when it's like, when we're laughing about me not having Bleach videos, but it literally came out. Maybe I'm gonna do that just out of spite. I'm gonna make sure it comes out the day before this video comes out, and you are the fool now, Mathwiz, and now no one can make fun of me about not making Bleach content. Kinnikuman, a 50-part love story, like, I'll just make 50 Kinnikuman videos. Well, we were really off topic. This is turning out to be a long episode, and I didn't think it was going to be long at all. But yeah, like I did like when Terry Man sort of like, everyone who died, and he just sort of loses it and fucking goes wild on Mountain Man. I don't know. I guess some of the like just the purity of because it's not super complex, but there is something about the purity and the raw emotion that sometimes like gets to me. I've noticed. But anyway, then we get to the last encounters with Kinnikuman and Mongol Man, aka Ramen Man, versus I almost said Spring Man. Oh no, I guess first is Kinnikuman versus Atlantis Man. Never mind. That was the fight that had the blood, where because Buffalo Man's like, the power, maybe your friendship will harm you, and of course because he is like, man hugging his friends after their fights, he got hit with the blood curse.
Yeah, I guess there's maybe kind of a. Is there some sort of like a clash here? Well, obviously, like the friendship thing is big in this arc. So the fact that like Kinnikuman has these people, it's a case where like the bonds are being used against him, whereas like the Devil Choujin are also like relying on teamwork in a way, but
yeah,
because through here they're trying to sabotage him, trying to sabotage Kinnikuman by after they've died, but
yeah. And it also
I don't know.
Like, and this is where this is probably where I was really thinking about the soft power system, where it's like, okay, if you use this mirror, you guys can go into like the spirit world and punch the ghosts that are fucking with Kinnikuman, and they're just like, yeah, let's do it. And I'm just like, okay, hold on. Like, again, it's just a very soft power system where they just kind of do whatever and just roll with it. Like, which I guess is the comedy bleeding into the action, because comedy is, generally speaking, the world is very loose. Like what I always think about is SpongeBob, where it's like, okay, it's underwater. By the rules of this world, they're underwater, so when they move really fast, you'll see bubbles and stuff. But also there's like a joke where it's like, they're like sitting outside with a campfire, and it's like, hey SpongeBob, aren't we underwater? And then the campfire just goes out. Like, the rules are malleable based on what's funny, but then here you have some of that malleability with the action, I guess, and it's wild and goofy. But yeah, Kinnikuman gets in the same situation as Robin Mask, but then he avoids the same mistake. Well, because Meat like points him to the surface so that he doesn't worry about Meat's hand.
Yeah, it's another moment where like I don't know what to take from it. Like Meat's divine intervention gets him to not prioritize Meat. I don't know what to make of it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. I hadn't thought about that. Just like I didn't even think about it until like rereading. I just quoted what I saw on the page, and I'm like, yeah, that's the thing that happened. Of course, you also get Kinnikuman using the Kinniku Buster, which Buffalo Man's like, hey, I can come up with a counter to that. And anyway, then we get who is it? Oh, it is Springman. Oh, that's right, it is Springman. Okay, yeah, Buffalo Man and Springman versus Kinnikuman and Mongol Man. Yeah, I don't know. This one I didn't have much to say about, at least until Buffalo Man. Because like it was just the like I'm reading my notes, and it's funny because I'm like, wait, it was Mongol Man the whole time, and it's like Mongol Man was Ramen Man. I've been double rused. Like, I guess I just got caught up in the pace of what was happening. So
we're also kind of at the point where maybe there's more to come with this the fact that Ramen Man is trying to disguise himself, like, because at the moment it's just like, okay, that's a thing that happened. And Kinnikuman's like, oh, no, he wasn't Ramen Man. I will honor this. And it's like, okay, like maybe something more will come of it.
Yeah, I don't know. But anyway, the part that's probably my favorite fight in the manga so far was probably Kinnikuman versus Buffalo Man. So I'd heard earlier, even before I read it, and then I mentioned it earlier, where maybe Kinnikuman versus Warsman. It's kind of like Luffy versus Katakuri. Kinnikuman versus Buffalo Man is kind of like Yusuke versus Toguro. So, because you have power level.
Yeah, because I guess the power thing.
The gradually increased power. Well, also you had like I laughed because when Meat at the end, or was it Meat? Oh yeah, no, yeah, because Meat after they repaired him, and it was like, oh no, Meat's dead, and then he was actually alive. That like what Toguro had, like what Kuwabara and Genkai as far as like deaths, and I was like, wait, hold on, this is just Yusuke versus Toguro. Like, no, I just got that vibe from this fight, and yeah, the power levels and how the power levels were handled definitely reminded me of that. Like the way Buffalo Man was like, oh, I'm only going to use this level of power. No, I'm going to go up. I'm going to go, just that I definitely thought of Yusuke versus Toguro.
Yeah, that seems fair. I guess the difference was one fight I was invested in, the other I wasn't.
Damn, Math was being mean now. You're just done, and it's getting hot in your room.
This is what's gonna happen when there's nothing I can say about a manga. I'm just gonna start bashing it, and I'm gonna start contradicting things, and I'm gonna become the bad critic.
You're gonna become the heel of the Nen Show Podcast. But yeah, well, it's also that he, like, well, because Buffalo Man, he wanted to get stronger, so he sold himself to the devil, which is kind of like how Toguro, like, oh, he wanted to get stronger, so he became a literal demon, like, just stuff like that. I picked, I was like, hey, hold up, that's familiar. But also, I guess you have, and just to talk more about this fight, is like, the way that they, like, oh, my counter for the Kinnikuman Buster is, like, I flip you around, and the Kinnikuman's like, well, okay, then I'll just, like, fly and use the Kinnikuman Buster on the ceiling and hit you there instead. Like, it's just, again, just, like, it's just being really wacky with it. But also, I guess you had one thing I thought was interesting is that, like, because Buffalo Man, like, he had his power, and he was kind of like, the Akuma Choujin are all about cheating and fighting unfairly and using the environment, where Buffalo Man, after a point, like, he sold himself to the devil, but he wanted to fight Kinnikuman fairly. Like, he fixed his mask at some point so that they could just keep fighting. Like, he just, he just wanted that, like, which I kind of, like, I guess maybe that also made me think about Toguro, where he wasn't, like, the worst person. There was some humanity there.
Yeah.
And which is also kind of how he lost, because he wasn't being a true Akuma Choujin, the devil reject within him, sort of rejected him. And I don't know, there was stuff it was like, I think I was gonna just like, oh, I'll stop reading here, but it was also like, I just kind of want to keep reading. So I enjoyed it.
I wonder if this was the character that the commenter was like, oh, this was one of my favorite arcs and one of my favorite characters in the initial run, because I'm just like, okay.
I would assume so, because it's also it's currently my favorite arc, and I liked Buffalo Man and the Kinnikuman versus Buffalo Man.
At least one of us is enjoying this.
And I guess another factor into the reliance thing is that, like, because there was a whole point where it's like the scars open up and stuff, like, he couldn't take that strength that he'd sold his soul to the devil for, like, which again kind of factors into the reliance thing, because he's, because he wasn't strong enough, he relies on this other force, and then he can't fully take it. So, but yeah, like, at the end he says, like, oh, this fight was fair and wonderful. So, like, if Buffalo Man shows up again, that'd be cool, because he's very much like like Wars Man, I think, where the way he sort of had like that heel face turn, and I don't know, I liked it. I don't have much else to say.
You still had more to say than me.
Yeah.
Tune in next time when it's just a solo podcast. It's Craftsdwarf gets to
wasn't that just Fairy Tail? We've already been here. By the way, there was one comment on the Patreon that was like, I want them to read Gintama, so we have the inverse of Fairy Tail, where Mathwiz is interested and Craftsdwarf isn't, because I've watched some of Gintama. I stopped watching it. So I do think I'll like it if I watched more or read more of it, I guess, but it's like, I don't know, I have no idea. So, but yeah, that about covers it for the arc. One of us liked it.
Both of us read it.
Both of us read it.
Yeah, okay, I guess this can be where I can post the joke that I told you in private, where I was just like, maybe I'll just pretend to do the reading and say that I read Kinnikuman, but I won't actually do it.
Like, there were parts there where you definitely read it, but there were other parts where like, think about it, maybe you just stopped, and I didn't notice, like, because I was talking enough where you're like, yeah, that was the thing that happened. I'm like, yeah, that was the thing that happened. It's like...
I'm too much of a coward to actually do that.
So, Mathwiz, you're going to love this. For the next stretch of reading, we're reading chapters 160 to 273. So we have over 100 chapters of Kinnikuman next time. Yay! I can hear the joy in your sighs and, like, your soul draining away. There's joy there. All right, thank you for listening, and... that about covers it. I hope you found the discussion interesting. It went on way longer than I thought it would. Maybe we were a bit off topic there.
No need to vote on the patron poll, because the Nen Show ends today.
Mathis quits. I mean, hey, we like Soul Eaters, so, how many times can the patrons miss? All right, thank you for listening, and we will see you next time.